This is Performance Delivered, Insider Secrets for Digital Marketing Success with Steffen Horst.
Welcome to part 2 of our 3-part series on how small businesses can grow through digital advertising. In part 1 of the series, we talked about Google search, particularly PMax. Today, our focus will be on how small businesses must approach advertising to be successful, which channels they have at their disposal, and which pitfalls they should avoid. Here to speak with me and unpack all of that is Navah Hopkins, brand evangelist at Optmyzr, an award-winning turnkey PPC management suite built on a foundation of barrier-smashing AI and machine learning power. Navah has over 15 years of digital marketing experience and has worked for companies such as WordStream, Hennessey Digital, and at Zoomer. She has a passion for innovation fueled by a hybrid strategic partnerships, data analysis, and consumer engagement. Navah is a serial entrepreneur, SEO and SEM philosopher, blogger, content strategist, and bounty hunter on a business development dance floor. Navah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It is always a pleasure, particularly helping with SMBs. It's a passion for me.
Perfect. Well, and I forgot one thing. You're also a dog mom, wasn't you?
Yes.
3 dogs.
Yes.
I should have put that in my intro next time I'm there.
Yes. You mentioned the bounty hunter bit. One of my dogs, HK, is named after the Star Wars character HK-47. For anyone that knows Knights of the Old Republic, the assassin droid.
Yeah.
So we named one of our dogs after HK. So
Interesting. Yeah, we learned something else. Big Star Wars fan, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, usually I start the interview by asking my guests how they got started in their careers and what led them to where they're currently. Now, we covered that last week, so we don't have to go there again. So therefore, let's get straight into today's topic. In small businesses' quest for success with advertising, there are pitfalls obviously there. From working with different SMBs, what are the pitfalls that you have come across that businesses should be aware of, that they tapped into and then were struggling?
So there are a number of pitfalls, but it really does depend on at what stage of the business you are and where your campaigns are being set up. So for example, when you're first starting off and creating your campaigns, it actually used to be a very easy pitfall to accidentally create a smart campaign account. And what that would do is actually limit your ability to apply any settings whatsoever. And you would have to convert it into a normal account. And the only way that you could do that to avoid that smart campaign is to click this itty bitty little blue link called "Are you an expert? Move along." So one of the big pitfalls is Google, as much as they do a lot of really good things in accessibility, their UI does have some seemingly intentional accessibility pitfalls. Mm-hmm. Where important information is really tiny, or maybe on lower contrast with the gray and the blue versus on white and blue and things like that. So anytime you're looking at the UI and the accessibility seems a little bit off, pay extra attention to that feature. This is especially true when it comes to your budgets and your bids. So in particular, Google loves to say, spend, just keep putting more budget in, put more budget in. And that'll typically correlate with, the OptiScore goes up. Now, we just did a study and we found that OptiScore does actually correlate with good performance gains, but that doesn't necessarily mean throwing a whole bunch of money away. It means making intelligent decisions based off of your account structure. So one thing to consider is how much budget do you need to get enough leads in your day to make the marketing worthwhile. So a good rule of thumb I like to use is so long as you can fit at least 10 clicks in your day, you are on paper set up for something approaching success. Now, what does that mean? You can get at least 10 clicks in your day. If one of them turns into a customer, that's a 10% conversion rate. That's exceptional for non-branded paid search. So obviously, if you're budgeting less than that, you're going to have a harder time with your conversion rates. You're going to have a harder time making money. And in fact, if you budget too low, Google will actually stop serving your budget. So what you may want to consider doing is actually putting in a bid floor and a bid cap. Now, we covered this a little bit in talking about Performance Max when we talked a little bit about this with the bidding strategies, but that is a very big pitfall, is not budgeting enough. Now, another really big pitfall is leaning into automatically created assets if your website is not great. Here's why. Google is a loving, helpful machine. It genuinely is trying to make your life as easy as possible. However, if what you give it to make ads for you is not great creative, and you know your website's not the best, or you know that the copy needs work, it's pulling from your site. So it's kind of a sign that your site needs help. So only opt into automatically created assets if you truly do not have time to create assets yourself, i.e., text, images, extensions, now known as assets, things like that. Another really big pitfall. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I believe is kind of a really, really big, important piece in the advertising game, right? And you said if your website is not great, don't let Google kind of develop your ads for that. But for me, I would take a step back and say, if your website is not great, should you really do advertising with that website? Because what you do is you send traffic to a website where people might not be able to find what you're looking for. Your website
Exactly.
might be from the early, 2010 or whenever, and you're basically wasting money. So I quite often say, is it better maybe to build a landing page? Because building a completely new website might be a big task. But you could build a landing page specifically for your advertising campaign and take a lot of the problems out that come with that quality score, for example, right? Paying high CPCs because the content on your website is not, what's the word I'm looking for, is not matching with the search intent
Yeah.
of a person and ad copy and so on.
And same thing with site speed if it's too slow.
Right.
But another component to this is call leads. So one of the reasons why call only campaigns and call leads are so powerful, and it's actually why Google kind of prioritizes them a little bit if they can, you do not have to have that risk component enter the equation if all the user has to do is call you to become a customer. Now, that's not going to work for everybody. But that is definitely an off ramp. So if you know that you can't take care of the site, at least consider the call only campaigns. Now, I did want to make sure that we could talk about one other pretty big pitfall, which is your time zones and how you set your ad schedule. So one of the things that you kind of make some really important strategic decisions at the start of your account. What is your time zone? What is your currency? Things like that. And if you set your time zone for say for example, I'm on Eastern time. I'm in Rhode Island. I'm in New England, but I service all of the US and I service customers in other parts of the world. Am I prepared to do the currency and the time zone calculations for every single market to have them all run out of my account? Or do I want to run an account per major time zone? Now, for an SMB, you're probably not looking at global, but you still are likely going to have a consideration around time zones. So one thing I actually found working at the amount of software companies I have is that Google will, if you do no location targeting, California, Texas, Florida, and New York, in some order, tend to be the top 4 locations that budget will be allocated if you target the US. And you don't say any other mechanics there. So I would 100% consider using location targeting, but also bear in mind that time zone and when your ads are serving are going to be different. So if your account is set up on Eastern time zone and you're seeing a whole bunch of later or kind of midnight, wee hours of the morning leads, that doesn't inherently mean that those are bad leads. Those could just be people on the other side of the country. So just make that consideration whether you want to have an account per major market or whether you want to have campaigns per major market, and then just account for that in your scheduling. One of the nice things about Microsoft, I'm going to sneak Microsoft in here, is that it actually lets you serve ads in the time zone of the user instead of the account. So you actually can consolidate a lot of those campaigns.
What I would want to add to what you just said is 2 things. It's one thing is with small budgets, especially when we talk SMBs and even smaller businesses like local businesses. What I've seen quite often when talking to our team is that budget runs out quickly. There's obviously no infinite budget. And if your customers are making decisions towards the end of the day, because that's when they're looking for your services, and you run out in the morning, you're probably not going to be very successful with your campaign. So look at when do you have more success, or think about before you start, is the likelihood higher to engage with your target audience. That's one thing. And the other thing is, which I see quite often with SMBs, is like their targeting, their geo-targeting is off. They advertise outside of the US because they kind of have a setting, and I don't remember exactly which one it is because
It shows interest in the location or present in the location
yeah,
versus that present. So yes,
exactly. And all of
100%.
a sudden you target outside of the US and spend a significant amount of money there because you've not been tight enough with that geo setting, basically. So that's another area I think companies should look at. Now, as we talked about last week about Google Search and PMax, there are obviously other Google products that SMBs, small businesses, can consider when their goal is to grow interest in their products and their services and generate sales or leads. Can you talk a little bit about what other solutions there are, what other products they can select?
Sure. The most knee-jerk reaction is local service ads or the Google guaranteed ads. Now, what's really fun about them is that you don't actually have to send people to a website. They can call you or message you through the email that you have configured with your profile. And each local service ads profile essentially behaves like an account ID. So if you have, for example, 10 locations, you might have 10 profiles. Now, local service ads recently changed their ranking that proximity is no longer a factor. So where before you used to have super segmented profiles, and you might even consider renting a location just so that you could say that you had that proximity.
Mhm.
Now it's far more about the luck of the draw, which locations actually take off. Now, a really important mechanic about local service ads is that there's essentially a 2-week interview process where Google is figuring out how good are you at responding to leads. So they'll send you quite a number. And if it sees that, hey, you're doing a great job, you're responding, we're seeing some things are being booked, you'll continue to get volume. If it sees, hey, lots of missed calls here, or it doesn't seem like any of this is really working out, it'll start to taper down. So it's really important that you are calling everyone back, even if it's a missed call and you know that it's a bot. Just show Google that you're calling those people back. And then 2, make sure that you are logging, archiving, or marking as booked business when you are seeing success. Now, with local service ads, there's a weird mechanic, and you'll hear different people voice different things, and it's 100% due to the fact that local service ads as an ad product is one of the less developed, I'll put it that way, on the Google roster. I have found that if you budget more aggressively than you intend to spend, the local service ads product has an easier time spending. So for example, for legal clients, I might set a goal of $100 or $200 a phone call, and I'll budget somewhere around $7,500 to $10,000 with the goal of spending closer to $5,000 to $6,000. And again, these leads are only charged if it is a connected call or that message where it definitely reached you because it's a message, it reached you. Local service ads recently took away the ability to dispute, so to get an actual money back from their leads, but you still can get an ad credit if there is such a thing or such an issue where the lead isn't quite right. But bear in mind that the full-on dispute process kind of went away. The final thing I'll say about local service ads is local service ads are one of the last few ad products that allow for zip code targeting. Most other ad platforms have shifted to kind of cities or DMAs with radiuses and things like that. So yes, you can still use zip codes, but I have personally found that targeting the area I want and then excluding zip codes I don't want is a little bit easier. Also make sure, and this is again where local service ads are less produced than others, make sure that your verifications aren't randomly expired. So there's essentially 3 major screens on for local service ads. There's your business verification, there's your leads, and then there's your reporting. So for under the business verification, you'll see green check marks where everything is correct. Every once in a while, show a green check mark, but the information's actually expired, and so your ad stops serving. So you just want to make sure that everything is always correct. Just spot check everything. But yeah, they're great. I know you asked about what are some of the other ones. So I'll give a quick shout out for Demand Gen. Demand Gen is essentially the top of funnel awareness version of PMax. So it covers video, it covers display, it covers discover. It's now going to cover video action. That's going to get rolled in there. I'm super excited about Demand Gen. I think it's a very powerful ad format that not enough people are taking advantage of. And it's 100% because people are afraid of video. More and more people need to embrace video. In terms of other ad products, pretty much everything else falls under PMax if you're thinking about the grouped ones. Of course, there's search, of course, there's shopping, display, and video. If you're an SMB, you really want to focus on where can you get the most amount of ROI on your time. So for your time, local service ads are a great resource. Search is a great resource. PMax is a great resource. Demand Gen is going to be good if you are currently seeing success on paid social. If you're currently struggling with paid social or you haven't started paid social, leave Demand Gen for 2025. Don't worry about it right now.
Now that we kind of covered Google, let's step outside of the Google universe. What channels outside of Google should SMBs, small businesses, consider when they kind of build out their marketing plan?
So this is the surprise one, Amazon, and Amazon's local offering is so cool. I am so in love with it. Yes, the ads are display ads. I 100% grant you that if you are looking for a text, someone's searching for XYZ product, that's not what this is. But what it does do is it lets you have that amazing visual. It can connect with a lead gen form, or it could just send to the site. And these ads serve on Amazon and their partner network. The ads can be targeted based off of Amazon purchasing behavior. So for example, if I just bought a whole bunch of shoes, I bought some super comfortable shoes, someone could make an assumption based off of my other purchasing habits that I tend to do a lot of travel and I tend to do a lot of kind of work events. So if they wanted to target me for some travel discounts, that's a very powerful opportunity. If they wanted to target me for a maid service to help keep my house clean while I'm away, and so I have one less thing on my plate, it's an idea. So there's a lot of really powerful things you can do with the Amazon data. I also need to give a very big shout out to Microsoft and the amount of work that Microsoft has put into not only their Performance Max, but their Audience Network offering. I think one of the reasons why Audience Network tends to still kind of fall on the sword is that people approach it without keeping that conversion mindset in mind. So the Audience Network, just for anyone that doesn't know, is a gathering of Microsoft-owned properties and partner sites that have display segments. If you don't have conversions, like it's a good kind of top of funnel awareness, it does amazing when you have conversions. So too many people think about the Audience Network as just kind of build a remarketing list and awareness traffic. If you have the conversion data to feed into it, there are some really great deals there, and you're able to get placements on LinkedIn, get placements on Forbes, get placements on the major news networks, get all these really great placements, typically around 30% cheaper than you would get on the Google Display Network. So if you have placements that you love, do a quick little experiment on Microsoft's Audience Network. And then also it's worth noting that you can exclude the Audience Network from your search campaigns and then run targeted Audience Network campaigns to supplement them. If you're doing Performance Max, on Microsoft, it tends to kind of combine them. But if you stick with the siloed approach, you can do a lot of really cool things.
Interesting. How about the likes of Instagram, Facebook, TikTok?
Yeah, there's a ton there. One of the reasons I think people start off as either paid search or paid social is that it's a lot to learn all at once. So if you begin down the path of paid search, you tend to kind of leave paid social because it's just, this is too much, this is too much.
Yeah.
And if you start down paid social, you kind of leave paid search alone because it's too much. What's really kind of nice is that the Googles of the world are socializing their mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
So on the Meta side, I think there's a lot of value there. On the Instagram side, I think there's a lot of value there. There is inherent risk in an election year that you're going to have super polarized conversations, and there's a little bit more brand sensitivity that you just have to be mindful of when you're engaging in paid social. But there are absolutely some great deals to be had. The most important pitfall to be mindful of is that paid social has the lion's share of their strategy at the ad set level instead of the campaign level. So if you're Google first, you're used to putting most of your effort into the campaign, and the ad groups support that. With paid social, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Meta, whether it's Instagram, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Snap, Pinterest, all the paid socials, it tends to focus far more on that ad set level. Now, on testing, their testing tools are okay. You, the human, will probably come up with better tests. The real value are the audiences, and the ability to target people based off of behaviors they've shown and off of seeds that you share with the platform. Now, the caveat to this is that depending on your industry, you may not be able to target nearly as efficiently as you were before. So, just like with paid search, we kind of get used to attribution not being perfect. With paid social, you have to get used to it not being really perfect. The other thing that's kind of really unfortunate, and I made this point during my MozCon talk, with Meta, you have Facebook and Instagram in particular, you have to kind of make these genie wishes on targeting because you can no longer do exclusions in your audiences. You can only target, and you get and statements, so you can be as narrow as you want, but you have to make that perfect audience. You can't kind of leave things to chance because you no longer have the ability to exclude.
Well, there are a lot of options for SMBs and small
Yeah.
businesses. So where should they start? Is there an easy way to say start with Google or start with social? Does it depend on what businesses are, what audience they go after? How would you answer that question?
It begins and ends with how comfortable are you with visual content? If
Mhm.
you are very comfortable with visual content and you are able to be engaging with your customers, honestly, paid social is going to be the better road to start. If you are super in the weeds with your numbers, you have your business operations down pat, and you're nervous about visual, but like you have everything else together, you have all of your data together, paid search is probably going to be the best. In terms of budgets, I would not run a Google campaign with less than $1,500 a month minimum in the US, region dependent. Whereas with paid social, I might be a little bit more comfortable with $500 a month as a minimum budget. It's worth noting that most ad platforms offer ad spend credits of $100, $500, so on and so forth. And if you're looking to get started, the best way to get started is who happens to be offering an ad credit at this time. Most do. I will say for those of you that are local LSAs, absolutely do them. Like this is not a maybe. You should do local service ads. But for everyone else, I would really think about that visual question. How prepared are you visually, and can you engage with people that will want to engage with you?
Now, as you started talking about budget, the question always comes up, at what point should you kind of add another channel to kind of your channel mix, right? Let's say you start off with search and things go well. And it's like, well, I want to expand. Does it make sense to split $2,000 into $1,000 here or 1,500 here and 500 there? Or does it make sense to collect more data first in one channel to grow to your max there before you venture off into another channel?
It's highly dependent on your customer value and your impression share at the time. So if your impression share on search is 90%, yeah, take some budget, you're fine. If your impression share is 30% and you're just breaking even or you're just in a profitable spot, but you clearly have room to grow, I would be very nervous about taking budget from that sort of campaign. The other major consideration is how much time will you have to invest in the test. So the smaller the budget, the longer things take to ramp up and to gather data. So I mentioned $1,500 for Google or paid search. Honestly, you can go a little bit less with Microsoft, but it's essentially $1,500 a month for paid search. and for paid social, minimum 500. If you're working at those minimums, you likely are going to take 4 to 6, maybe even 8 weeks to really get a reasonable amount of data to say, yes, this makes sense. Yes, these are the ways we want to market. Yes, these are the types of people that we're getting, and they're turning into customers, so on and so forth. If you're budgeting closer to $5,000, $10,000 a month on search, budgeting closer to that 2,500, 5,000 a month as starter budgets on paid social, you're giving yourself more fuel so you can cut that time down, because essentially you're paying with either time or money in the beginning, because brand new accounts take time, but it can be sped up with a higher investment. But as an SMB, you are not going to have the luxury of infinite budget. So I would recommend going on the more conservative side, testing one part of your market. So for example, my favorite dog training client in the world, Koru Canine, I've worked with them for years. What I love about them is that we started off super small in one area, and then as we proved out the model, we expanded. So it went from spending like maybe $1,000, $2,000 all the way up to now they spend $25,000 a month. But the reason why that works, and to be fair, they're a consulting client, like they do the lion's share of the work. The reason why that works is they know their business. They know where they can lean in and where they need to lean out. I think it's really, really, really important that businesses take accountability for how much is a customer worth? How many leads do I need to get in to get a customer? How many leads do I currently get, and where could that number grow to without hiring more people? Like all these operational questions. I know we're going to talk about that in depth the next episode, but it is worth bringing up when considering budgets.
What are some of the basic SMBs need to have in place? I mean, we talked earlier about landing pages, which is kind of part of probably the answer, but what are other things that they should have in place before
conversion tracking, which is part of landing pages?
Let's talk about conversion tracking.
Yeah. You will likely have heard this phrase Google Tag Manager bandied about quite a bit. Google Tag Manager essentially is a bucket that gets hung on one element of your site that just is persistent. So that could be your header, that could be your footer, wherever it ends up. And that Google Tag Manager bucket holds all of the tracking pixels, all of the little snippets of code to help all of the various tools that you might want to advertise with or get analysis, all these things, sends information back. Now, why that tag is so important is by having a Google Tag Manager versus all those individual codes is you cut down on site speed. So the other nice thing is that there's a lot of diagnostics to help you know that it's set up correctly. So amazing tool, great way to look at that for conversion tracking. And I believe we talked about this, but just in case we didn't, conversion tracking is fundamentally what do I want the ad network to pay attention to, and what do I just want to know, but I don't want them to actually focus on this for my bidding, my budget, my reporting. So in Google, there's something called primary and secondary conversions. A primary conversion is a conversion action that actually will count towards your reporting, actually count towards your bidding, it actually factors in. A secondary one will not. So in your reports, you will actually see a metric that says in conversions and all conversions. Your in conversions are your conversions that are primary, all are all. Now, when you're talking about Meta or Instagram, you're not necessarily sending different types of conversion actions, but you can say, I am expecting a lot of volatility during this period, or I'm expecting this to be a little bit spiky. So as much as you can convey that information to the platform, it's important. All ad platforms require lots and lots of conversions. So if you cannot hit 50 conversions, whatever action you set, whether that's a form fill, a phone call, signing up for a newsletter, watching a video, scrolling to a certain depth, whatever you set as your conversion action, whether it's a sale or just an insight, if you can't hit 50, you may need to consider adding in more micro conversions, so actions that are not actually sales, and then putting in conversion values to help guide the equation. But if you are hitting 50, no problem, and you're fine, then just do that.
Anyone who wants to get more information about that, in the first part of this conversation, we talked in detail about why, secondary and primary conversions are important. And, Navah just touched on it again. So head on over to the part 1 and listen to what we talked about there. Now, Navah, unfortunately, we come to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me again on Performance Develop Podcast and sharing your knowledge on how small businesses must approach advertising to be successful. If people want to find out more about you, about Optmyzr, how can they get in touch?
Well, of course, you can check out PPC Town Hall every Wednesday. It's being reimagined, so it may be called something new in the future. You can check me out. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. I'm part of the Women in Tech SEO group. I'm part of PPC Chat. There's also the Paid Search Association. You can always ask me questions. I'm the Ask the PPC for Search Engine Journal. And I'm around. Just come say hi. Happy to help.
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Please join us next week for our final episode on how small business can grow through digital advertising, when we will look at the business operations side of advertising. So we'll talk about things like how to determine KPIs and how we make sure that the budget spent is really generating revenue value for your business. If you like the Performance Develop Podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast application. To find out more about Symphonic Digital, visit us at symphonicdigital.com or follow us on X at SymphonicHQ. Thanks again, and see you next time.
Performance Delivered is sponsored by Symphonic Digital. Discover audience-focused and data-driven digital marketing solutions for small and medium businesses at symphonicdigital.com.